Hi, I'm Nick Stow, and this is the Ecology of the Ottawa Valley. Today I'm in one of my favorite places in the Ottawa Valley. This is the Kennedy Creek Marsh in the Four Seasons Community Forest in Deep River. And I'm here today to introduce you to wetlands and the beauty of wetlands, the ecology of wetlands. The wetland we have before us here is a marsh. There's four different types of wetlands: marshes, swamps, fens, and bogs. A marsh is what you would normally, most people would think of when they think of wetlands. It's a place where you can see the water pooling in ponds, and you can see these lovely marsh vegetation, these reeds, these grasses, some shrubs. This is what most people think of when they think of a wetland. But what is a wetland? A wetland is, strictly speaking, a place where the groundwater is at or near the surface of the ground, so that the plants that grow there are specifically adapted to having their roots in the water. That's what a wetland is. Marshes are probably the most popular type of wetland in the public imagination. They, of course, are the areas that are beloved of turtles, great blue herons, frogs, otters. When we think of wetlands, this is usually what we think of. There can be freshwater wet marshes. There can be saltwater marshes. This obviously is a freshwater marsh because we're thousands of kilometers from the ocean. And you can see the diversity of habitats in here, the different types of species. The most obvious is this lovely pond, of course. That's where you'll find the frogs and the turtles. Far in the back is Kennedy Creek. It kind of meanders through the wetland from my right to the left. You can see someone has installed a bird nesting box there. That could be for swallows. Nesting boxes are often installed for wood ducks as well, but that I think is probably for a swallow. And you can see how productive this wetland is. All of this lush growth. That's because there's plenty of water, there's plenty of nutrients carried down by the creek from the decomposition of all of the plants from the previous year. All of those nutrients get recycled through the system. And of course we have this because it's a nice open area, we have a lot of sun. Lots of water, lots of nutrients, lots of sunshine. We get this incredible amount of productivity. We don't get a lot of shrubs in the marsh, a few small ones, and that's because trees, for the most part, don't like to have wet roots. And here the groundwater level is right at the surface for almost the entire year, and that prevents most trees and shrubs from growing. But we do have shrubs around the periphery. You'll see of the far side of the wetland. Also in this nice straight line here, we have a lot of shrubs. Alder here in the foreground. And that line of shrubs is actually growing on an old beaver dam. And that's one of the reasons that this marsh is here, is that there was, it still is, an old beaver dam, goes out straight through the marsh. It will be, a younger part of the beaver dam will be across the creek, and that's probably where the beavers are still active. And it's this beaver dam that has raised the groundwater level here and created this nice marsh. And the beaver dam itself is a little higher, a little drier, and so that's why the shrubs can grow along here. There's beautiful edge habitat here, as you can see, with the shrubs, with the marsh itself, with the edge of the pond, with the edge of the trees over here. All of that is edge habitat. And where you get a lot of edge habitat, you get a lot of biodiversity. Animals that will use the forest and the wetland, or the marsh and the shrubby swamp. That's what makes these places so rich, is this abundance of resources and this abundance of habitats. One of the myths about wetlands is that they are all sites for storing carbon, carbon sequestration. And that is true of some wetlands, particularly what we call the peatlands. Those are fens and bogs. Fens and bogs definitely accumulate carbon. As for other wetlands, well, they may or they may not. It depends a lot on the circumstances. You have to think back to our basic physics lessons in high school, and conservation of matter. If this wetland, if this marsh was continually sequestering carbon, then it would, of course, be getting bigger. Where would that carbon be going? In a forest, when the trees are growing, they're sequestering carbon. That carbon is getting stored in that wood biomass. In a fen or a bog, as I'll talk about later, there's an accumulation of peat, and the carbon is being stored in that peat. But where is the carbon being stored here if, in fact, this wetland is serving as a carbon sink? Fact is, it probably is not serving as much of a carbon sink. There may be a little bit of carbon accumulating in the pond, and perhaps over time that will fill in that pond. But in actual fact, the rate of decomposition here in this marsh is probably about equal to the rate of carbon accumulation, of biomass accumulation. And so it's not really a carbon sink. It's more at an equilibrium. Now, that doesn't mean that it has no value in terms of climate change. Of course, wetlands, there's an immense amount of evapotranspiration coming off this wetland. All of that evapotranspiration is carrying away heat. So this has an enormous cooling effect. And the wetland itself is storing water. Some wetlands store water well, some wetlands don't. This one stores water pretty well. And that water is important in terms of adaptation to climate change, because that water, that elevated groundwater level, that will feed Kennedy Creek through the summer when there may be a water deficit and when the creek might otherwise run dry. These areas of elevated groundwater, these wetlands, they provide the flows that keep those creeks flowing in the summertime and preserve that habitat. So wetlands, all wetlands are important in terms of climate change, but not all wetlands are carbon sinks.